Do tonight is just give you a little history, obviously. That's why I'm here. But I want to give you some background before the school was even founded to let you know what Romney was like. A lot of people know what Romney was like while they're here. But I just ended up writing this about a week ago for something else. But Romney was a quiet town of only 569 people in 1860. And it had grown about 25% since the previous census in 1850. The Northwest Turnpike, which is now today's U.S. Route 50, brought much traffic and commerce to Romney. The town was prospering and many businesses necessary for the survival of a small town. South Branch Valley's fertile fields produced the crops needed for the citizenry to survive. Farmers were busy from dusk to dawn, but needed the help of the slave population to maintain their business. Hampshire County was the fourth largest slave county in the state that would become the new state of West Virginia, with an enslaved population of 1,231, based upon the slave census of 1860. With the outbreak of the war, it was difficult for businesses to continue as normal. Many business owners, students, teachers, laborers enlisted in the Confederate Army. Those young men west of Middle Ridge, which is about 10 miles towards Burlington on Route 50, mostly enlisted in the Union Army. With the loss of manpower in the town, Romney and the surrounding areas struggled to maintain their way of life. Then came the constant parade of Union and Confederate troops into Romney. Based upon the records of the war, Romney was a high-traffic area. The written word states Romney changed hands 56 times, but is estimated to be actually more than 60. Occupation, remaining for more than one day, is a different story, and this has a more devastating effect on the population. The number based upon research for occupation is only 9 times. That meant the troops had to come in, set up camp, stay for more than a day, and then leave. Some families left their property and moved to safer places further west. Those that elected to stay were in constant fear of property, both personal and real estate, being stolen as deemed necessary by the commanding officers of the army of the day as it proceeded through town. Diaries, journal, and newspaper articles from Romney residents tell of moving their farm animals into their homes to protect them from being confiscated by the troops. Soldiers tell of coming into Romney and seeing many abandoned houses near the end of the war. With no major battles occurred in Romney, the small town was perfectly situated in a strategic location. The western part of town, with its high perch above the South Branch River Valley, provided an observation point for troop movement from New Creek, which is west, a Union stronghold, and from the River Road, Moorfield, which is south, to observe the Confederate troops. The Cumberland Pike, present Route 28, provided access to the B&O Railroad, Green Spring, and other Union strongholds in Cumberland, which is north. To the west was Winchester, the site of 3 major battles and much troop movement. After the war, Romney struggled. The loss of 125 young men who comprised a large workforce before the war left a large hole in the economy, both agriculturally and educationally. The loss of the enslaved population affected the plantation-like farms in the South Branch Valley, and with the loss of the young men, the Classical Institute, which was our administration building, closed due to the lack of income and loss of instructors and students. Ex-Confederate soldiers were disenfranchised with no ability to purchase land, vote, hold political office, and the loss of other rights. These rights were not fully restored until after 1870. Some soldiers actually left or threatened to move to South America. Romney's population suffered. In 1880, federal census showed an almost 40% drop in the population until gradual recoveries in 1890 and 1900. In 1910, the population nearly doubled. The rise in population became partially attributed to the completion of the B&O Railroad coming to Romney in the fall of 1884. So that gives you a little idea what happened before the school was founded in 1870. There wasn't a lot going on in Romney, and boy, at the end of the war, Romney was devastated. In fact, there's a book called The Devastating Hand of War, Romney during the Civil War, and that sort of title sort of sums up the whole thing. I found this article in the tablet in 1934, and I want to thank the School for the Blind alumni for getting that scanned, and we got it on the school's website from 1945 to 1988. All the tablets are online, so that's a blessing. I'm probably the one who uses it the most, but I really appreciate the School for the Blind alumni doing that. This was from October 1934. It was titled Our Battlefield and was written by a student. During the Civil War, Romney, our battlefield, which of course there were no major battles here, was the site of many skirmishes fought between the Confederate and the Union Army. I'm not so sure that's true, but there are some records of things, people shooting at each other, but I wouldn't call them a skirmish. The town was captured and recaptured between 40 and 50 times, but we do not know the exact number. Our school grounds were a favorite meeting place for scouts of both armies. When our new football field was being plowed and scraped by means of a tractor and scraper, the workmen found many relics of these battles between the Confederates and the Union soldiers. After scraping, the pupils were much excited, going out on the field looking for them. They found many bullets, pieces of bones, rusty old horseshoes, a broken bayonet, a flagstaff tip, a canister, and other souvenirs which were uncovered. These discoveries were taken to Mr. Krause's office. They would make a fine beginning for a small museum. Other things could be added whenever they are found. We expect the field to be another kind of battlefield from now on, which is a football battlefield, which is where the deaf school played football down there. I can remember when I was teaching here, Mr. David Allen had a class, and he was talking about a metal detector. And I happened to have one. I had the idea that I was going to find my fortune and fame by going around in people's lawns and finding millions of dollars. But my office was right down here on the underneath the boys' dormitory here at Keller Hall at the end of the hallway. And David wanted to know if I'd bring my metal detector and he'd bring his class over. And I could show him how it works. And I said, sure. So he brought his kids over. We went outside the door at the end of the hallway here, and I didn't have that metal detector on more than 10 seconds, and I heard this beep, real strong beep. And I thought, well, what the heck could that be? Because it was only 5 inches off the sidewalk. And I had my little trowel with me, and I had one of the kids dig it up, and lo and behold, it was a Civil War mini ball. Wow. Yeah, just right outside here. And I told those kids, I said, this is not supposed to happen. And I didn't plan it here either because I'd never found one of those before. But I took it up to the front office and gave it to the superintendent for the museum, and Lord knows whatever happened to it. But I thought that was sort of interesting. I'll continue on here. As we all know, the life of a student with special needs can be challenging. With family support, good instruction, good teachers, and the right tools, success can be achieved, and for over 150 years, the School for the Deaf and the Blind has provided that assistance in the state of West Virginia. It is easy for a reader to imagine the state of education today, having recently either graduated or known someone who has completed high school. But imagine, if you will, the education of a blind child over 100 years ago. As I started working with blind children in 1980, I noticed they was pretty much the same as any other children, but simply lacked the ability to learn visually. As the educator, it was my job helping them to see the world and explore it. I once took students on a field trip to the ocean, and while walking with one of the students into the surf, he said, "Can you take me out to the deep end?" Well, he was social, intelligent, athletic, but he'd never been told or seen the composition of 70% of the Earth's surface. This was a teachable moment if I ever saw one. Later in my career, I was sitting in a conference dinner with a woman who was blind. She had a PhD in education, and the conversation turned to the applesauce on the plate. Someone remarked that that applesauce had the same color of something that could be found in a baby's diaper. There was some laughter except for my dinner companion who exclaimed, "Babies don't poop red." And there was silence at the table. She further explained, "Apples are red, so therefore..." No one had ever explained to her that the inside wasn't red. Once again, this is an example of an intelligent person who was blind that just did not get the opportunity to learn that little, I call them nuggets, little nugget visually. So that has a lot to do with the way I approach teaching. You got to get them nuggets in there, folks. You got to teach those kids those little things. That's what the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind has been tasked with for over 150 years. Thousands of students have come to Romney to have those blanks filled in. One such student was Talton Miller from McDowell County, West Virginia. Here's how I discovered this young man. I was contacted by the school to investigate the education of this particular child. I was given the contact information of the inquiry, a Mrs. Sue Harden of Jacksonville, North Carolina, Talton's niece, and began the search for the student in the school records and the West Virginia tablet I recently scanned and had overseen the digital preservation of all those papers. I went immediately to the digital files for enrollment and located Talton, who enrolled in the school September 14th, 1910. The record states that he was born June 14th, 1902, and was the son of J.R. and Naomi Miller of Berwyn in McDowell County, West Virginia. No date for withdrawal was listed, but that's common. I was shocked to find that Talton, blind at the age of 5 years, both eyes were blown out by a dynamite cap. That was the quote. I learned in talking with Mrs. Harden that Talton was from a mining community, and dynamite caps and other items common to coal mines were always laying around. And the kids being kids, they always found them. She stated that kids were playing near a fire and one exploded, blinding Talton. Little else was known about Talton's life in McDowell County. Mrs. Harden does recall that her father spoke of Talton holding his hand while he walked along a rail fence as a little boy. He often smiled and thought how reckless that was, being guided by a blind boy. Searching the federal census of 1910, Talton was listed with the family in Big Creek district of McDowell County. He was 7 years old, blind, and had not attended school. 10 years later, in the census, he was once again in McDowell County, had not attended school since September of 1919, and was 17 years old. Both of these dates find Talton at home and not at school. That's not unusual. Enrolling in the school of 1910 would have required a Herculean effort of dedication, love, and desire to have Talton receive an education. Today, the trip to McDowell County takes about 6 hours. During my time in the school and the outreach office, it was one of my favorite places to go, mainly because I was a fan of the Rocket Boys by Homer Hickam, and I made many pilgrimages to the beloved town of Coalwood. In 1910, before cars were hardly thought of in the state, wagons, carriages, and trains would have been the primary source of transportation for students who come to the school. Once at the train station, trains were routed through Parkersburg, Clarksburg, Morgantown, Cumberland, Maryland, and eventually into Green Spring to Romney. There are many stories in the tablet, and I want to tell you, I can't imagine what parents would think of today, of students' adventures of overnighting in a railway station, because the trains always didn't run on time, and the kids got stuck at night. Being taken in by strangers and being met by relatives for the night. Added to this, the schedule, which was rarely on time. Once they arrived in Romney, the school's wagon would pick them up and deliver them to campus. During his time, Talton would have resided in the dormitories located in the main administration building. since the dormitories on the north end of campus were not constructed until 1922. The current administration building has undergone numerous architectural redesigns over the year, which don't include the fire in 2022. Once the campus instruction began, classes began immediately at the beginning of the school term. They were self-contained classrooms. Talton was likely assigned to the primary grade teacher, Miss Nettie Lucas, since he was not attending school previously. Braille would have been a priority for him since he was totally blind. Music lessons were taught by Mr. C.E. Whipp, the violin, and Miss Agatha Eastill, the piano, for which Talton learned both. He would have appeared on campus as an 8-year-old. I'm sure this environment would have been quite different from the coal fields of McDowell County. Unfortunately, the tablets from the fall of 1910 all through 11 and through 1912 are missing. It would have been interesting to see the mentions of the activities during those first years of the school, his first years of the school. I read almost 3,000 pages of the tablet from 1913 to 1920 and pulled out the mentions of Talton in his experiences. He played a violin solo on February 13, 1915. Keep going here. 1918, and the local attorney and prominent citizen, J.S. Zimmerman, gave the address to the students. Students were encouraged to write articles for the tablet. During the spring semester of 1919, Talton, then in the 8th grade, produced a short story called The Dog is a Friend. And this is the story. When we come to think of the matter, we find that there are no truer friend than a dog. When a man is rich and well-to-do, he seems to have lots of friends. Or if any man is a highly respected citizen, and there happens to be a small break in his character, there are hundreds of people who will down him if they can. There always seems to be someone waiting for a chance to bring about your downfall. When a person has plenty of money, he's pretty generally has many friends, but as soon as he gives out, his friends are gone too. The dog is not this kind of a friend. He stands by his master in riches and poverty. He will lick the hand when he has no food to offer. When all other friends desert us, he remains faithfully by our side. Once friends are few who prove to be so true as this. The old world would be a much better place if all of our friends were true as a dog. Wise words from Talton. In addition to a busy schedule, Talton would have been looking forward to the festivities surrounding the return of the boys from World War I. May 3rd of 1918 was a big day in Romney. The school had been active participants during wartime. They participated in rationing, and the girls made clothing and other items, if requested, for the soldiers. The parade began at 1:30, formed on the grounds of the institution. The day was exciting for the students with music by the Romney Band and a speech by the current governor, John J. Cornwell. Governor Cornwell was always a friend of the school, living right across the street when he resided in Romney. The Schaefer Funeral Home was the governor's mansion. That's where John J. Cornwell came back to after he was governor. He gave the big day address from the front porch and was quite the honor for the institution. The speech was political in nature, with the governor calling for support of the Victory Loan, a federal program to help pay for the cost of the war. In the fall of 1918, the Spanish flu epidemic came to school. It was almost certain that Talton contracted it. About 80% of the school's population had the disease. Within a few weeks, about 185 of the 220 students had the disease. October 15, 1918, the tablet reported, "We are grieved to say that 2 of our bright girls at the School for the Deaf were unable to withstand the ravages of the disease and its complications of pneumonia, which developed and died after a very short illness." They mentioned that the citizens of Romney were also affected by the disease. The girls, Lena Myrtle St. Clair of Wyoming County and Lottie Lee Brown of Greenbrier County, were mourned in a funeral service on campus. Both of their remains were sent home on the train with staff members, Mr. R.H. Cookus and Mr. James W. Crawford accompanied them for their local burial. These comments, written in 1918, hold much truth in the time in which we are currently living. Two conditions stand out prominently in a terrible epidemic. First, the suddenness of which it came on the whole country and prevented all adequate means of warding against it. And second, the inability of keeping any provision for the care of the sick in active service because so many people in attendance were stricken with the disease. It now seems probable that the affliction will pass as rapidly as it came, but in the country at large, thousands have been claimed by death, and still larger numbers are weakened by the ravages of disease. It is hoped that the medical science will discover the cause of the disease and be able to prevent its return. By November 11, 1919, the tablet says, "We often see the hearse pass by our school going out into the county with corpse. When we take a walk and go to the cemetery, we see many new graves there." During the summer, the tablet announced that Talton is anticipating a very pleasant visit during his vacation with his relatives in North Carolina. The posting of the honor roll for students in attendance on September 25th lists Talton Miller. This last listing I could find for him in the pages of the tablet. He was 17 years of age. Many of the students felt that they were able to leave at that time. No further information on him except what I found on Ancestry.com. Talton Miller died at the age of 22. Mrs. Harden said he was told that her uncle died of a heart ailment related to this blindness. She figures since the blindness was an accident related, it was probably another cause. We have been unable to find where Talton was laid to rest, but on Ancestry.com, a wonderful tribute was written by his sister, Justin, or they called her Jess, Miller Davidson. Rest in peace. And this is the poem that she wrote about Talton. "It was springtime when I saw you last. You were smiling through the window as the train went past. Was it the spring bird's song that lured you away from me, or a message from an angel whispered to set your weary heart free? A bundle of braille letters, a flower of faded hue, a picture that smiles into my tear-dimmed eyes is all that I have left of you. My flowers are blooming now. The ground is white as snow. Your violin lies silent in this place. No hand to draw the bow. The notes your magic fingers made upon its tuneful string was sweeter than the nightingale's trill. Around your grave he sings. The birds still sing in the valley, the rhododendrons fair bloom, and all of my life I still remember the days I lived there with you. All I have left of you, all that I have are these. Nothing is left of the olden days but love and memories." That was by Justin Jess Davidson, 1923, in Colwood. And this is the letter that I received. Mrs. Harden was real nice after I sent her this whole story. And she sent it to a gentleman who was related to Talton. And he sent me a letter, Dr. James Miller in Knoxville, Tennessee. I read your wonderful story about Talton, and all the family here in Knoxville, Tennessee, as well as West Virginia, North Carolina, and Illinois, were equally thrilled to read your account of this young boy. It was heartwarming to discover that you brought this little boy back to life for his family. I will add what little I know about Talton. My dad, Howard L. Miller, was Talton's younger brother and was close to Talton as my dad was only 2 years younger. They played together. Somewhere in the McDowell County, maybe Berwyn, was a tall water tank where neighborhood boys would dare each other to walk around the tank on a narrow wooden ledge. Talton was the only one who would do this because he said he didn't look down and get nervous. Heard that one many times. Sometimes my dad would be with Talton and hold on to him, as the other boys, my dad would not walk around the ledge without Talton to hold on to. Another story my dad told me concerned the murder of Mingo County Sheriff Sid Hatfield and the deputy on the courthouse steps of the county seat in Welsh. Talton and my dad discussed the horrible event, with Talton saying, "Howard, if we had a couple of good horses, we could have gone after them Pinkerton detectives." Talton named the specific breed of our horses, but I can't remember the name. As you stated, Talton could play the violin quite well. After Talton died, my dad was given the violin and kept it for years at our house in Bartley, West Virginia, in McDowell County. My brother, Roger L. Miller of Princeton, West Virginia, now has that violin. Talton was about 21 years of age when he died. My dad told me the death certificate states that Talton died of a broken heart. We can only speculate why he may have died of a broken heart. Interestingly enough, our newspaper printed accounts only 1 month ago of people dying of a broken heart, with possible reference to the pandemic. As to how Talton became blind, his dad said, thoughtlessly threw some dynamite caps into the fireplace, which totally blinded the boy. That's about all for me. Thank you for writing the interesting story about Talton. You have brought him back to life for us. So that was nice to hear. Now, when we were together last time, we were working on the tombstone down at the cemetery at Indian Mound. That was done shortly after that. Based on the research of that, there was 57 kids, I believe, that died on campus here in the day. I've got a long story about that, but I won't bore you with it. But of those kids, 9 of them, from what I could find, were buried at Indian Mound. And we didn't even know at the time that there was a plot for the West Virginia School for the Deaf and the Blind. I found an original map from back in the 1920s and 1910 somewhere, and it stated it had WVSDDB. That was when it was called Deaf, Dumb, and Blind School.
Oh gosh.
So that was where the plots were, and there are 9 kids there buried there now. The one story that it was really good in 1915, Lulu Arbogast was one of the students that died. The remains were accompanied to the final resting place by the entire student staff and pupil body of both departments. The service was conducted by Mr. Alkire, head officer of the school, and Rock of Ages rose gently on the evening air from the lips of their schoolmates and friends. Imagine, if you would, the march of close to 200 staff and students down Main Street toward Indian Mound to lay the rest of their beloved Lulu. So that's how they did it. If the student was buried here, they all marched. They had the service here, and they all marched down through town and laid them to rest in that plot. And only one of the 9 kids had a stone placed there by their parents. Other students didn't have any parents. They were wards of the state and were laid to rest there. And the ones in the 1880 before the railroad really didn't have any way to get the body home, because you couldn't ship a body home by wagon. It would take too long to get there. So the stone has, and Jamie up at the Schaefer's Funeral Home helped me with the design. It says, in remembrance of those pupils who were released from perpetual silence and darkness to experience the fullness of God's presence through their eternity and throughout eternity. And there's a picture of the deaf sign for I love you on one side, and there's a RIP in Braille on the other side of that. And the students were J.J. Summers, Mary Jane Martin, Lulu Arbogast, Rosa Schaefer, Charlie Simmons, Joseph Kelly, Effie Bell Brannon, no relation to Mr. Brannon, I looked that up, and Ada Muncie and Marie Smith, and that was from 1874 to 1929. And then at the bottom it says, then will the eyes of the blind be open and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Isaiah 35:5. So I thought that was a wonderful tribute to the kids. I tell you, the school bent over backwards to make this happen. I was so impressed with them. so impressed that I forgot his name. I can't think of who the superintendent was then. Mark? I think his name was. Well, Gandolfi, yeah, Mark Gandolfi. I went up to him with this proposal, thinking I could raise money in the community, and he goes, no need to raise it, we're just going to pay for it. So not only did they pay for that stone to be ordered and placed, but also Howard Hill Johnson's stone and his wife's stone had been knocked over and were dirty, and they paid for the cleaning of those stones and have them restructured to where they don't fall over. And they also cleaned Effie Brandon's stone that's right there in the same lot. So the school really did a nice job with it. I was real impressed with it. So I think that's all I got.
Dan, it was wonderful.